36 Chapter 7 After Mr. Aguro made a few calls, the police, paramedics and everyone's parents plus Nizu showed up. The police took one look at the unconscious man before quickly cuffing him with quirk-suppressing cuffs, saying that he was a B-rank villain that led a Yakuza group. The officers took everyone's statements of what happened. Tsukachi arrived shortly after that and approached where Izuku and the girls sat, with Eri still clinging to Izuku, unwilling to let go. "I can understand why you did it, but this still is vigilantism. I'll do what I can, but there's only so much." Tsukachi started. "Actually, he agreed to a spar and this gym is licensed for quirk usage," Izuku smugly interrupted. Somewhere behind him he could hear Nizu trying to suppress a cackle. Tsukachi's eyebrows shot up. "True. Why would a Yakuza boss agree to a spar?" Izuku shrugged. Eri shifting with the movement. "How could I hope to understand how a child abuser thinks? That does remind me though." Eri said someone called the rapper was the one that got her out, but he was in danger. Tsukachi sighed in defeat. "Good to know. The rapper is an alias used by Kendo Rappa, another B-rank villain. We responded to a disturbance at the Shihasake residence earlier today. Kendo killed over 2 dozen known Yakuza and was gravely wounded, but he'll live. I'll do what I can for him. You'll have me and my lawyer's help. Maybe we can get him into a villain rehabilitation program." Nizu chirped as he climbed onto Tsukachi's shoulder. "Well, I guess that clears up that. Then there's the matter of Eri. She doesn't show up on any systems. By all accounts she doesn't exist. Let's have the paramedics check her over while we discuss the options," Tsukachi said while gesturing to the 2 paramedics. Izuku looked down to Eri and she looked up at him with wobbly lips. "Those nice people want to make sure you aren't hurt. Is that okay? You can say no." Eri seemed to gather her courage as her lips stopped trembling. I'll do it." Izuku gently set her down and paramedics led her over to a bench by the wall with a decorative potted plant beside it. "There are currently 2 options, and seeing as the girl is rather attached to you, you 4 will decide. No matter what choice you make, I want Eri to attend the special classes we have at UA for children whose development has been negatively affected by villains once the school year starts. The 2 options are we place Eri into foster care or I make her a ward of UA and hire you 4 as her guardians. Do not make this decision lightly. She may come to see you as her parents," Nizu finished seriously. Izuku looked between each of his girlfriends. "What do you think?" "I doubt she'll do well in foster care," Rumi said with a frown. Himiko looked to where Eri was with a faraway look. "She deserves a place where she'll be loved, not just tolerated. I've read bad things about foster care and I want Eri to be happy. I think she'd be happiest with us," Mei said as she rubbed Himiko's thigh, bringing the blonde back to the present. "And if she starts thinking of us as parents?" Izuku asked, several barely suppressed squeals of delight coming from where their parents were gathered. "If she does, then I wouldn't mind. I already have some parenting books for the future," Mei said casually. Izuku, Rumi, and Himiko all blushed a small amount before Himiko spoke up. "I don't know why, but I really want this. It feels instinctual." "I suppose that makes sense. Cats have been known to adopt abandoned babies, even other species, up to and including bears." Izuku pondered aloud. "I don't know how maternal I am, but seeing Izuku holding her was making my instincts go wild. I want this too. I kind of figured we'd get to fuck before we had a kid, but out of order is okay too," Rumi said with a shrug. Izuku went red in the face as he looked around to make sure Eri was far enough away to not hear. That's when he saw her sitting on the bench and getting visibly more upset. Her terror was coming back. Her horn began glowing and she started screaming for the paramedics to get away as danger sense flared. The paramedics backed away with raised hands, trying to calm the girl. Izuku jumped up and approached slowly, his girlfriends close behind. The glow emanating from Eri's horn increased. "Stay back. I don't want to hurt you too," Eri cried out. The potted plant beside the bench began to shrink slowly at first, but the speed increased until it was only a sapling. Izuku came to the conclusion that the glow was her quirk and it was out of control. It seemed to rewind organic matter. Seeing as the plant was the only thing affected, he reached out with empathy and tried to force calm onto Eri. There was resistance, but it worked. The glow from her now smaller horn abated and she began sobbing. "I'm sorry. I'll be good. I promise." Now that the glow had fully disappeared, he scooped up the sobbing girl. "Shh, it's okay, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Mistakes are okay." Mei started rubbing soothing circles into Eri's back. "Yeah, failure is the mother of success. I blow things up all the time, but I learn from it." Himiko ran her thumb along Eri's horn. "You don't have to be good all the time to be loved. Trust me." Rumi ran her fingers through Eri's hair. massaging her scalp. Don't worry, kid. We'll help you get a handle on your quirk. Eri looked up with watery eyes. My quirk is a curse. It made Papa disappear. It must have happened when her quirk first manifested, he thought. Eri, what happened to your father was an accident. Your quirk is not a curse. It's a blessing. With training you could heal any injury. You could save countless lives with it if you wanted, Izuku said softly. Eri lowered her head back onto Izuku's chest and exhaled shakily. Really? Izuku leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Really? Deciding the girl in question deserved a say, he asked. Eri, would you like to stay with us? Izuku and the girls all held their breath as they waited for a response. Eri clung tighter to Izuku. Please. Tsukachi walked up with Nizu on his shoulder. It seems you're also uniquely capable of stopping her quirk if she loses control of it. Before I believed you to be the best option. Now I believe you to be the only option. So what do you say? Nizu chirped with a smile that told Izuku he already knew his answer. We accept, he said resolutely. Rumi, Mei, and Himiko nodding in agreement. Nizu clapped his paws together. Excellent. I'll handle the paperwork. You'll all have to take an online course and pass an interview from Child Services, but I have no doubt you'll pass. Also, since you'll be caring for a ward of UA, you're expected to keep her safe. I'll be issuing you 4 bodyguard licenses for quirk usage in the defense of your ward. I am showing you for a great deal of trust in this. Do not use them as an excuse to perform heroics. Loopholes won't save you from me if you break my trust. Nizu finished with a warning in his tone. All 4 of them stood up straighter at the tone. Yes sir, they all said in unison. Nizu pulled out his tablet from somewhere. Now, the paperwork should all be finished by the time classes start in a month. The 5 of you can move into the dorms early so Eri has time to acclimate. Izuku's eyes bulged. Does that mean we got in? Nizu waved his hand dismissively. Of course. You were the top 4 ranking examinees after all. You'll all be in Class 1A. He turned his tablet to show them the scores. Izuku's jaw dropped. He had not only placed first with 120 villain points and 80 rescue points, but he had also broken All Might's record of a combined 150 points. Rumi was second with 80 villain points and 30 rescue points. Mei was third with 50 villain points and 55 rescue points. Himiko was fourth with 80 villain points and 20 rescue points. Fifth place was Bakugo with 77 villain points and 0 rescue points. Bakugo would no doubt be fuming once he found out. How do you have the results already, sir? Izuku asked. It had only been a few hours after all. Oh please, it's just adding up some numbers and judging the rescue points. Nothing that takes too long. I was originally going to mail everyone a hologram as a kind of joke. Imagine waiting a whole week for word only to receive a letter in this day and age, and when they open it a hologram pops out, Nizu said, cackling all the while. Mail? Who the Furumi began but stopped at the sight of the glare Izuku threw her way. Imko walked up to them, leading a gaggle of parents. Can we meet our grandchild yet? She asked mirthfully as the rest of the parents were cooing at the sight of Eri clinging to Izuku. Well, he supposed he could mark them down as supporting the decision. Apparently being Nizu's personal student and employee had its advantages. While the dorms were being renovated to better suit their needs, Nizu gave him a black metal credit card and told him to get anything Eri might want or need. Not wanting to thrust Eri into a crowded environment, they opted for online shopping. With Eri in his lap and pointing to things on the laptop, they bought anything she might want or need. It seemed as if Himiko and Rumi were almost instinctively good at caring for a child. Really made him wonder how Himiko's mom had fucked up so royally. Maybe it was partly instinctual also? Perhaps she saw Himiko as a predator more dangerous than herself and it scared her? At any rate, Ian May decided reading parenting books was their best bet. That's when he discovered that full cowl not only boosted his strength and defense but also his brain. It explained how All Might could fight at super speeds when a normal human couldn't hope to keep up. With the combination of cell activation supercharging his bodily processes and full cowl, he could read an entire book in minutes. All Might had seriously underutilized his quirk. With May's quirk being ocular, her reading speed was also nothing to sneeze at, nearly keeping up with him. The two of them had read through every parenting book they could get their hands on within days. The online courses, tests, and interviews from Child Services were almost alarmingly easy. It certainly explained, at least partially, why the foster care system had the stellar reputation it did. Now they only had to wait for everything to process. Only a week after the entrance exams, Izuku and the girls were moving into the dorms. That's when they discovered the reason behind the renovations. Nizu had somehow given them an entire floor to themselves. No other students were designated to it. Izuku's room was 3 times the size of a normal dorm room and had a bed the size of 2 king-sized beds put together. On the bed was a note that said the room soundproofed. He had a feeling Nemuri had something to do with the bed and note. The girls' rooms were right next to his, and Aries was directly across the hall. Moving their things in hadn't taken long at all thanks to all the training they had done over the years and the freight elevator that was commonplace because of the varying sizes of people due to quirks. The first morning after moving in, Izuku was wearing a pink apron, workout shorts and a tank top as he was making some pancakes with diced up apples inside for Eri. She was wearing unicorn-themed pajamas and a smartwatch that matched Izuku's and the girls'. She was patiently waiting in the kitchen while the girls were still waking up upstairs. "When's your birthday, Eri?" he asked over his shoulder where the little unicorn sat at the breakfast bar waiting patiently. Eri's feet ceased their swinging. "I don't know." Izuku smiled reassuringly over his shoulder. "Well, we can't have that. The doctors seem to think you're about 5 years old, so how about we call today your 5th birthday? We can throw a birthday party and even go somewhere if you want." "Really?" Eri asked in disbelief. "Of course, sweetheart. So from now on, March 15th is your birthday. I'll talk to Nizu about making it official." Izuku had barely finished his sentence before the smart fridge displayed a message that said "done," followed by an animated version of Nizu doing a dance. "I don't think I'll ever get used to that," Izuku thought. Rumi came downstairs then wearing only a red leotard, her muscular hips and ass on full display. Judging by the way her nipples printed through her shirt, she wasn't wearing a bra. She strutted into the kitchen and kissed Izuku deeply before turning around, making it a point to swing her hips and wiggle her tail as she made to join Eri, sitting next to her and ruffling her hair. "I know you wear those for pajamas, but don't you think it might be a little scandalous for Eri to see?" he asked. "Nope. I'm proud of my body and I have nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, my hero costume is going to be a leotard, only with thicker material," Rumi said simply. Well, he supposed she had a point. She was essentially wearing a one-piece swimsuit and he wouldn't want Eri to view her body as something to be ashamed of. He ruffled his curly hair. "You're right. Sorry." He finished the pancakes as Himiko and Mei joined them. Mei was wearing a pair of boxers he was pretty sure were his and a huge t-shirt that said Naps on it that he was sure was his. Seeing her wear his clothes was much more attractive than it had any right to be. Himiko was wearing small black booty shorts and a dark red tank top that he could also see the shape of her nipples through. He quickly surmised that living with his girlfriends was going to kill him. Mei groggily hugged him from behind and mumbled a good morning into his back before shuffling off to join Eri and Rumi. Himiko grabbed him by his shoulders and heaved herself onto his back, her legs wrapping around his waist as she bit into his neck and began drinking as she purred audibly. What's she doing?" Eri asked cautiously. Rumi placed a comforting hand on Eri's back. "She's drinking his blood. Her quirk makes her crave it. People used to call her quirk cursed too. But ya know what, Kit?" she whispered conspiratorially. "They were wrong. There's no such thing as a cursed or evil quirk. Did people hurt her like they did me?" Eri asked with a small, worried frown. "Yeah, but not as badly. She's come a long way," Mei answered. Eri was staring at Himiko like she had seen her for the first time. Himiko, for her part, was oblivious to the world around her as she drank her fill while Izuku bustled around the kitchen completely unimpeded by her weight or his loss of blood. After everyone had eaten, Izuku announced that today was going to be Eri's official birthday. They decided on a quiet cat cafe and a Ghibli movie night since she had never seen any. Eri seemed to really enjoy the cat cafe, but she still hadn't smiled much to her guardian's chagrin. Getting the girl to smile was starting to seem a monumental task. Lunch Rush himself made Eri a cake. Izuku's moms, Mr. Aguro, Mei's mom, Vlad King and a majority of UA's staff were in attendance as they turned down the lights in the cafeteria and brought out the unicorn-themed cake to a very surprised little unicorn. Everyone began singing in ridiculous tones with wide smiles. Happy PY birthday to Waihuo. They were part way through the song when Izuku noticed Eri was beginning to tear up. But despite that, she smiled. Illuminated by the birthday candle, she smiled for the first time, and it was a full, watery smile as happy tears ran down her cheeks. The song finished and Izuku scooped up the girl before taking her seat with her on his lap. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he whispered before kissing her temple and wiping away her tears. After a few tries, she managed to blow out all 5 of her candles and they dug in. Eri quickly declared cake a close second to apples. Later that night, after changing into her unicorn pajamas and binging several Ghibli films sprawled out across her guardians, Eri gave into sleep. Izuku carefully picked the sleeping girl up and carried her up to her room. He gently laid her down and tucked her into her bed. She could skip brushing her teeth for one night. Izuku and the girls each gave her a kiss on the forehead goodnight. They were on their way out when a quiet voice, heavy with sleep, sounded from behind them. "Good night, Papa. Good night, Mamas." All four whipped around to see Eri sound asleep, tuckered out after a long day of having fun. They all eyed each other with wide eyes before quietly exiting and closing the door. "Well, that happened faster than I would have thought," Rumi whispered once they were in the hallway. "But she said it in her sleep. Does it count?" Himiko questioned. They all seemed to be deep in thought before Izuku broke the silence. "Let's not bring it up. We don't want her to feel pressured. Let's go to bed before we wake her." The three girls nodded and whispered goodnights before going their separate ways. An hour later Izuku was lying in his bed thinking about how large and empty it felt when a barely audible knock could be heard. He got out of bed wearing only his boxers and answered the door. All three of his girlfriends were there. Rumi was wearing a similar leotard to the one from this morning, only wide and thick enough that he couldn't outright see her nipples, only their printing. Himiko was wearing a black sports bra and red booty shorts that left little to the imagination. Mei was wearing a black tank top that her four-pack could be seen through, and a blue pair of Izuku's boxers that barely fit on her hips. After letting them in and closing the door he spoke. What's up? Is everything okay?" Rumi hopped into the huge bed. "We're sleeping here from now on. I'm not sleeping another night alone when the people I love are right next door." Himiko eyed him seductively as she joined Rumi. "Couldn't have put it better myself." Mei grabbed Izuku's hand and dragged him to the bed. "If I have to sleep it's going to be with the people I love." Izuku was pulled into bed with Mei quickly tucking herself against his chest, her breasts pillowing out and threatening to escape their confines. Himiko pressed herself against Mei's back, spooning her and Rumi doing the same to Himiko. Izuku pulled the covers over the four of them with Black Whip as they whispered their goodnights once more. The four were quickly lulled into sleep as Izuku wondered at the difference of how empty his bed felt only minutes prior compared to now, though there was still an absurd amount of room. Izuku awoke in the middle of the night from his and the girls' smartwatches beeping and vibrating in a frantic alarm. The alarm that was set to go off if Eri pressed the special button on her watch that let them know that she needed them. In less than a second Izuku and the girls were swinging open Eri's door ready to fight God. Eri was sitting up in her bed with her blankets wrapped around her. Silent tears trailed down her cheeks as she trembled. Izuku sat down on her bed slowly and faced her. "Eri, Papa." Eri cried out in desperation as she exploded out of her blanket cocoon and launched herself at Izuku, wrapping her small arms around his neck. Izuku was a bit shocked at first, but after a moment he brought his massive arms around the trembling girl. "Did you have a nightmare?" He could feel her head nod against his neck as his girlfriends took up places around them on the bed. "Do you want to sleep with us tonight?" Izuku whispered. The only response was another silent nod against his chest. He stood up and carried Eri back to his room with his girlfriends following. Smut. The next few weeks flew by. It was the day that their classmates would be moving in. Eri had adjusted well and was sleeping in her own room most nights. Her nightmares were becoming less and less frequent. Izuku woke very early to the feeling of something grinding against his growing erection. He opened his eyes to see Rumi in front of him. She was wearing a black leotard that allowed him to see the dark skin of her entire ass as it ground against him. Himiko was on the other side of Rumi, laying halfway on top of Mei as she kissed at her neck and kneaded one of her DD-sized breasts through an oversized t-shirt. Rumi, he moaned out, assuming her to be still asleep. Rumi's arm reached back and pulled herself closer against him before looking over her shoulder to reveal that she was not only awake but smirking at him. "Is this okay? I know we've been taking it slow, but sleeping in the same bed is killing me," Rumi asked. Izuku grabbed her hip and began moving with her. "Yeah, it's been killing me too." Rumi grabbed his hand and guided it down between her legs and placed her hand over his, guiding his ring finger and middle finger to rub at her clothed clit. A moan escaped Rumi's mouth as his fingers found a rhythm that had her soaking through her leotard. A moan drew his attention to where Mei was. Himiko's hand that was kneading Mei's breast was now inside of Mei's boxers as she straddled her leg. Mei was cupping the back of Himiko's head as they were locked in an open-mouthed kiss. Rumi's hand reached back again and began tugging his boxers lower, the elastic band snagging on his cock. Deciding to help, he undid the snag and pulled his boxers down past his hips, his dick finally free and pressed between Rumi's cheeks. She wrapped her hand around it, her fingers barely able to touch, and gasped. She spun around and looked down with wide ruby eyes. "Holy shit, I could tell you were big but I didn't think you were horse cock big." Rumi exclaimed. Hearing the exclamation, Himiko pulled out her hand from Mei's boxers and licked her fingers clean. Izuku's cock throbbed in Rumi's grip at the sight. They scooted closer to finally get a good look at Izuku in all his glory. Mei reached over Rumi and swatted her hand away before fondling him like she did when she was taking measurements. 12 inches long and 2.5 inches in diameter. Rumi drooled while Himiko licked her fangs. Holy shit, you're going to split me in half, Himiko said with a dazed expression. Quirk growth spurts are the best, Rumi said as she wiped her drool away. I don't know if I can fit that, but that's what these tests are for, Mei said as she began pumping her hand along his cock. Rumi flipped over to his other side and joined Mei in jerking him off. Himiko flipped over Mei and settled between his legs and cupped his heavy balls as she took the tip of his massive cock into her mouth, her long tongue swirling around it. Mei and Rumi began kissing along his neck as their hands pumped in sync. He began to moan as his hips started to buck. He was helpless in the face of the combined assault. See close, he moaned after a minute. They redoubled their efforts, Himiko fondling his balls as she took more of his cock into her mouth. Rumi and Mei began to pump faster as they began to nip at his neck, perfectly in sync. With a guttural moan and thrust he finally came, Himiko taking more of him into her mouth as Rumi and Mei began to slow their movements. He could see Himiko's throat working as his orgasm continued, her not letting up for a second. With one final buck of his hips he finished. Himiko broke her suction on his dick with an audible pop as Rumi and Mei stopped their movements and laid their heads on his chest. After an audible swallow, Himiko laid down on Izuku's chest. That was amazing, Izuku breathed out with a ragged breath. You taste good, but next time you're going down on me, Himiko said with lust in her eyes. Deal, Izuku said quickly. They drifted off like that until their alarm went off a couple of hours later.